We'll be looking at Skylight PBX and focusing on Citrix performance management. The agenda is going to be an introduction to Citrix, and it's going to be pretty brief, and I'm going to fly through a lot of slides, so I apologize, along with the challenges associated with Citrix environment and how does Citrix work from a network application performance management perspective. Then we'll dive into Citrix end user experience analysis. We'll take a look at how PBX provides all this deep insight into the multi-tiered architecture and all the analytical data that we do collect. And then we'll have a conclusion where, as Yasmin pointed out, we'll have a short Q&A session. It's only a half-hour webinar, so we're going to move quick. I apologize for that. So to start with, Citrix FlexCast management architecture is a surface-oriented architecture. It integrates both XenApp and XenDesktop into one architecture. So before they were separate, now it's all integrated together as one. So what's it consist of? The main drivers of Citrix are delivery of secure virtual applications. Let's summarize it simply: virtual desktops in a big way. In addition to providing streaming capability and access control, elimination of application bandwidth and latency constraints that are associated with transporting applications across a wide area network or the internet. So in a lot of cases, Citrix leveraged to solve poorly written applications with respect to how they put the data on the network, that being they're bandwidth sensitive and or latency sensitive. But the Citrix aspect of it is very controlled with respect to client network traffic to and from that environment. So we're containing everything and controlling it within the confines of the controlled data center environment. We'll talk more about it. So the challenge is FMA. It's a complex multi-tiered topology. It's not a classic three-tiered application architecture. It's a complex multi-tiered architecture. With NetScaler as an example here, providing SSL termination, compression, and load balancing, and then access to the storefront is the basic web server that delivers the service catalog to users. So when I first log in, example, I was just at the doctor the other day, he pulled up his screen from Epic, and what's on the screen but a number of different applications that he has access to via Citrix, and that's presented to his screen via the storefront. We're going to do a deep dive into this architecture from a network performance management perspective. So, FMA is a complex multi-tiered architecture, as we stated, and it spans multiple teams. So the challenge here, when I was actually sitting on the side of the fence, like most of you folks on this call, the end users troubleshooting this, it spans multiple IT teams. So the challenge is you've got the network team, the security team, the Citrix team, the data center team, you've got a database back there, DBAs, etc. When problems happen, it generally creates a lot of finger pointing. The beauty of our PBX solution, performance management solution, is we eliminate a lot of that finger pointing because we provide analytical, actionable data that allows you to solve the problems quickly and in real time. So FMA isn't just about the Citrix proprietary protocol, independent computing architecture, ICA protocol. It's also about CGP, SSL, compression, channels, frame drivers, and a lot of other complex network protocols. The nice thing, once again, is that Performance Vision makes the analysis of all these different protocols within all the different layers of Citrix visible with key performance metrics and user experience metrics that are actionable and easily to troubleshoot with. So how does Citrix work? So, people travel. So Citrix breaks down the FMA architecture into 5 layers. There's the endpoints and locations. Example is the example I gave earlier. I'm sitting in my doctor's office. He pulls up his Epic screen, and there's a service catalog presented to him across, once again, a thin client session from his PC to the data center where all the work's done. So there's the, where am I located? It could be a mobile phone now. It could be, remote across the internet, etc. So various locations. Then security policies, right? If I'm, a local user within, the hospital system is, give an example of the healthcare organization once again. It's SSL to the load balancer and then load balancer to the storefront. So you can see the screen here. It's actually a shot from my doctor's office visit where that's the app that, was visible for Epic. And then if I'm external, of course, we want SSL termination by the NetScaler and compression, et cetera, all the good things that NetScaler does, and then down to the load balancer to gain access to that same storefront. So it all depends, what security policies we need as one of the layers. And then the resources, that being the catalogs, right? Hosted applications, Linux desktops, Windows desktops from a VDI perspective, et cetera. And then the control plane, that being, how Citrix gains access to the various, licensing resources, database, Active Directory, et cetera, all those back-end conversations that are pivotal to that end-user experience. If my doctor's sitting there and his screens are not refreshing, it's most likely because there's a problem at the back end or in that ICA channel from his machine across their local area network to, the front end. So how do you troubleshoot all those different layers and gain access to that? Performance Vision, PBX provides that. And then physical implementation, that being, where is this located? Where's our Citrix environment located? It could be in hybrid architecture like most architectures today, that being private cloud and public cloud, and then sitting on physical servers or virtual servers. Now the beauty of today's architectures is that it's a lot of virtualization, and that's where PBX plays a key part. How do I gain visibility into those key virtual environments to once again solve the different layer problems within the Citrix architecture, FMA architecture, to troubleshoot issues? So, how does it work from a global view perspective? We have the user layer, internal, external, remote users, access layer, NetScaler, load balancer, control layer, authentication, authorization, application licenses, policies, resource layer, basically the Citrix servers, that being what was traditionally years ago Citrix, where it was, everything, the applications were hosted on a Citrix server and, X amount of clients connected to that Citrix server, as well, providing that virtual desktop, or as it's known today, Citrix workers server environments. Providing compute resources to the end users, and then, once again, physical hardware, and today, as we all know, it's usually virtualized in a big way. So, how does it work from a, what we're concerned with here is network performance analysis and, the presentation layer with the independent computing architecture protocol, which uses TCP port 1494, or, if you so choose to use CGP, which uses TCP port 2598, and the advantage of CGP is it has a session reliability feature that a lot of customers like taking advantage of. So, how do we troubleshoot that protocol? And ICA is a proprietary protocol to Citrix. So it's not like they're handing out to Wireshark or, open source the information associated with this protocol. But what Acedian's done is uniquely developed the method to understand what the details of this protocol. In essence, we've reversed engineered how it works. So once again, ICA virtual channels. What's a virtual channel? So from the ICA protocol perspective, virtual channels are used for screen updates, audio, video, printing communications. Can't tell you, once again, back in the day when I was working at hospitals and or worldwide food companies, manufacturers, where Citrix was their main delivery for applications, because we had to leverage Citrix to provide those latency-sensitive, bandwidth-sensitive application, connectivity to far reaches of the world, Argentina, Russia, the Far East, etc. But I couldn't look inside the ICA protocol to understand, why our printing channel was having a problem. I had to play games within the various layers to understand, where the problems lie. And it was a lot of work, very time-consuming, and instead of taking minutes to solve it, took days, even weeks at times to solve that problem. But now with Acedian PBX, we have the ability to dive within the ICA protocol and get access to those individual channels. So let's talk about the Citrix end user experience analysis, that being PBX's ability, to provide this information to you. So a CDN breaks up the Citrix end user experience into access, launch, and use. So this is unique to CDN. This is unique to PBX. This is, if you go to Citrix and ask them about this from the network performance management perspective, they'll not know about. This is something that we've created, once again, associated with understanding and the deep dive that we can do within the ICA protocol, and more importantly, all those back-end protocols associated with a successful end user experience. Once again, that doctor analogy, how fast was that Epic screen populating for, my visit, my clinical visit to the doctor when he had to update it, my information, or retrieve previous information, understand what he or she has done before to help me from a healthcare perspective. So Citrix doesn't speak of this, just to point that out. This is unique to CDN. So from a access perspective, we're just going to take a look at the flows. And I've got a lot of slides here, and we've got a limited time, so I'm going to go through them kind of quick. So you can see, I'm in once again, that doctor. I'm getting to the storefront, either through the NetScaler and or load balancer. So that's my web interface, user password, and there's other steps in between it for available resources to be presented to me. So where's that gap? What's behind steps 1 and 7, where I could see a poor performance. Once again, not getting that screen update. I'm sitting there at the doctor's office. He's got other patients waiting, and we're not able to, move forward because he's waiting on Epic screens to populate over Citrix. So, authorization, it goes to Active Directory, right? So we need to understand how Active Directory is doing in addition to that first click, hit that web server, hit the storefront, and then in addition to user credentials, forward XML, and list of available resources, right, by the delivery controller. Think of the delivery controller as the main gateway to this. And then, valid credentials, once again, with Active Directory, and then request list of available resources from the database. So, we got, once again, the database team involved if there's an issue there. But we need to see where those database slownesses are occurring. And once again, a CDN PBX provides that. And then available resources presented to the storefront, and then ultimately back to the ability to have that screen populated, and we're off and running from a healthcare perspective with Epic. So from an external user perspective, once again, we're going through a firewall, we're going over the internet, it's my mobile phone, it's my iPad, once again, ubiquitous computing, right? But, we're hitting all those same control plane layers and adding a few more, that being security, added to this. So just understanding the path, the different points within the FMA architecture that we have to monitor and grab key performance metrics from to truly gauge the end user experience. So Citrix end user experience for the access layer offers you a complete visibility to Citrix access phase, network performance, server performance from a network perspective, storefront, Active Directory, SQL database, delivery controller, and then transaction details, right? HTTPS, SQL, etc. Full visibility. And now let's take a look at the launch phase. Launch phase of Citrix, the main performance driver, network behavior, server behavior, worker servers, DB, etc. What we just briefly touched upon. And then Citrix user profile policies, right? So, let's not forget traditional, let's say it's a Microsoft environment, and let's not forget about roaming profiles and challenges like that for end users for VDI and the performance issues that might be associated with, poorly architected user profiles, or the way the users use their environment, that they create a lot of bandwidth requirements, etc., or latency requirements. So from the launch perspective, user clicks on an icon to request, a resource to the storefront, and here we are, once again hitting the storefront, and there's some other processes going on in the back end in order to get the ICA file set for connection. So, requesting forward, with the broker, and for available registration VDIs, and then connecting to the XML format, and then determining best host to fulfill the request, right? Which server, which worker server, is available with enough resources to satisfy this user's request. And then once again, the delivery controller acts as that, broker to inform, and listen to which ports that we're going to be on. Once again, 1494 for ICA, 2598 for CGP. And ultimately, completing the session. So session launched, ICA file, auto launch. So, a lot behind the scenes just to make that happen, right? And once again, you need that visibility from a network application performance analysis perspective. Then a quick check for valid licenses, right? Can I run that application, right? Is it valid? And then check end user ticket validity, etc. So session okay, session launched, we're finally up and running, okay? So there's a lot to this. Once again, FMA is not, once again, repeating myself, a traditional simple three-tiered application architecture. It's a multi-tiered, complex architecture that you need visibility in all areas. So, back to that external user, adding to it the security aspect, the firewall, the addition of NetScaler for SSL termination, compression, etc., and then access to the worker servers with respect to the VDA agent or VDI session and the various components that comprise it. So once again, I'm throwing a lot at you, but just want to make sure I showed you all these steps in the back end that PBX, Performance Vision, is going to provide you deep insight into. So Skylight PBX offers you complete visibility on a Citrix launch phase. Once again, network performance, this very same, server performance, storefront, SQL database, delivery controller, which is key, right? That's kind of our traffic cop. Worker servers, license servers, and then transaction details, HTTPS, SQL. So from a HTTPS perspective, if you have access to the keys, we can put it into Performance Vision to enable us to see within the HTTP, the application layer. That's an option. If you don't have a packet broker architecture that's doing SSL decryption for you to provide layer 7 visibility, we have the option to provide that. And then the use layer, right? Use the Citrix environment, main performance drivers. Once again, network behavior, Citrix configuration from a policy perspective. How do I, hosted applications installed and published on the server with a delivery agent installed, application execution on the host server. Once again, on the keyboard and monitor remotely, that analogy of the hospital, the doctor, his keyboard and screen updates and printing, etc., all going over ICA. The processing and the application I'm running that I chose from Epic is actually running on that server hosted in the data center. Once again, that keeping the control within the data center for numerous reasons, security as well as a single point for making changes, etc. And then VDI hosted applications from applications not running on the server, client OS installed on a VM, right? Doesn't require VM per concurrent execution of the host application. All those great features. That's why we love Citrix and the value it brings. So one of the aspects of Citrix that I worked on a lot was network application performance analysis. Could we roll that application out as a native application across the network and provide use to all the users across the environment? So was that application latency sensitive? Did it require lots of bandwidth? And if it did, most of the time the solution was, let's put it on Citrix. Let's put that middleware in there. That way that client's traffic isn't impeded by the network. We eliminate the network in essence to provide that same rich application feature without the constraints of the speed of light from a latency perspective to gain access to timely end user response times, etc. So here an example of streaming applications. Applications not running on a server or user desktop. Applications are dynamically delivered when accessed. Example is Microsoft AppG, VMware ThinApp. Solution chosen for large number of applications delivered for resource-intensive applications. CAD applications, etc. There's a lot of solutions out there that once again need some big, horsepower. That when it's hosted in the data center, Citrix can perform versus trying to push that all across the network, across the world, etc. So let's take a quick demo here. I'm going to stop the PowerPoints, and I appreciate your patience. I know I bombarded you with a lot of PowerPoints there. So I'm just going to pause the presentation here for a second and bring up a web interface in the PBX. I'll maximize this here. So here's an example of PBX's dashboard, a simple dashboard for Citrix, where we're looking at and monitoring real time, Citrix, login. Remember we talked about the, the 3 phases that we consider critical from a CDN network performance analysis perspective for Citrix. So we got the login times, average, launch time, you can see average, and then server, performance over time duration, new connections, new logins, and then client connections by server, and then payload by virtual channel. So, we talked about that ICA protocol and what's going on within that, proprietary protocol. We're able to look inside it and see what's taking place and, who's using the most, payload, bandwidth, etc. So here's just an example of what you can do. This is just a basic Citrix dashboard, of which with PBX you can create your own and tailor it to specific views that you want to see. Maybe we want a Citrix view for the database team. Maybe we want a Citrix view for, the worker Citrix servers for the Citrix team, etc. We can provide that. So from a Citrix interface perspective, let's just walk through some of the great features. So from PBX, our main interface has 4 universes that are critical: application, network, and protocol. And if you notice in protocol, we have Citrix. And what I'm showing you on the screen right now is login and launch. So if I select login and launch, notice up here that's protocol, Citrix, login, and launch. And then here I've got the ability to go back in time from when to when, or I can come to the clock here and say, hey, I want to see the last 2 hours, last 12 hours, last 3 days of login and launch. I launch it, and the beauty of a CDN PBX is we're looking at a database. We're collecting that data, analyzing it as soon as it hits our interfaces, and rolling it up to a proprietary high-speed database that provides rich information like this. So the summary over here, you can see that I've got, connected clients, successful launches, abort rate. So I'm having some issues here. I've got some aborts, right? Login times, are they lengthy on average? And then launch time. And then over time here, I've got the login and launch time graphed out for the window of time that I selected associated with successful launches and aborted launches. So, this is a demo database where we're showing some issues. We want to show you some errors so they're meaningful to you. But then in the bottom corner here, we're seeing a breakdown by zones. So zones are unique to a CDN PBX. We're able to do it as, physical locations, that being, within your topology, your remote offices, your main offices, etc., from a user perspective. Or we could do it from a, virtual perspective, that being, the virtual tier, etc. So we can define zones in unique ways for meaning to us with respect to, what we want to see. So I'm, here I'm seeing teleworkers, remote workers outside of our, private cloud and their response times versus, various locations like Tokyo here, etc. And then over here I'm seeing a breakdown by servers, that being the worker servers, and the details associated with login, launch, payload, BPDUs, all kind of detail. I know it's kind of hard to see the screen. It's a little bit small, so I apologize for that. So let's take a look at another feature within this. Let's go up to, channels. So we'll take a look at channels here, and we'll do the same workflow, right? So I came up here, I could once again select from when to when if I wanted to manually do it, or I can go to the clock and say, hey, I want the last 12 hours, last 2 hours, or it'll just keep in what my last search was. So I'll just hit search, and it'll show us channels. So PBX decodes the different virtual channels that are used within this Citrix ICA traffic. Once again, unique to us. We've reversed engineered that technology. So we can take a look at, thin wire, I'm seeing printing, right? So if I want to see printing performance, just printing performance versus screen updates, I can turn off this HTML5 aspect and just look at, printing here. and see all the details. And then I can look down here at the same time window for, the BPDUs, PDUs, that being the channels with respect to channels as far as, traffic levels. Then over here, I'm actually looking at each channel from a payload and compression perspective. So look at, I apologize again if it's hard to see this, but from a compression perspective, how efficiently are we compressing that data? Is it, 100%, a compression rate of 100% means that 100% of the packets transmitted on a network are compressed. It doesn't provide the level of compression achieves, but, it tells us we're applying compression. So, key metrics there, just all in one screen. So PBX provides this to you very quickly. Once again, it's a database. The screen refreshes you're seeing here will be the same screen refreshes you're going to see in your environment. So let's take a look at another one. Let's go to performance. Select it. Once again, let's change it up this time. Let's do 3 days. Let's see what happens here. Let's see how fast it is. So I'll do a search on 3 days. Boom. Isn't that beautiful? What it took me before to do this, once again, back when I was in your seat, troubleshooting Citrix network application performance issues, was mine out the packets, analyze the packets, tie all those tiers together in spreadsheets from packet analysis, and that would take hours, days, weeks. Here it is in just a simple key click. I can highlight, any of these key metrics, and I'm seeing, once again, data transmit rate on the network server, how fast we're putting the data on the network, data transmit client, and then server response time. That being, am I waiting from a client perspective for that server to have the data to put on the wire to send to me, and what's taking up the most of the traffic. So if I turn, these off, I can see that, server response time is not bad at all. If I go turn them back on, I can see that, I've got 40 milliseconds of data transfer rate to client versus, about the same, but spiky to server, etc. And then successful launches, right, aborts, all over the time domain. So, very key performance metrics here. So I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to stop real quickly here, minimize this, jump back into my slide deck here. So conclusion, now here's the important thing. How did I gain access to all information? Well, analysis granularity depends on capture point locations. And the beauty of Obsidian's PBX is we can totally instrument the virtual environment. Our software appliance, our capture appliances can be distributed within this multi-tiered architecture. So we have that key visibility to see all those key metrics and collect those key metrics and analyze that data as soon as it hits our interface. And then, with Skylight PBX, you can monitor the end user experience, real performance metrics. You get the end-to-end visibility. Once again, it's more than just ICA, it's more than just CGP. It's, all those back-end conversations from Kerberos, et cetera. And that's what Skylight PBX, brings to the table as well. So, we offer HTTP, database, DNS, right? Are my DNS calls slow? Is that why I'm sitting at that doctor's office and unable to, log into the screen so he can, service me from a healthcare perspective? And CIF version 3, SMB version 2 and 3, then even VoIP, constant bitrate applications. So Obsidian's PBX solution is a pretty powerful solution, and the beauty of it is the results are instantaneous. I'm not doing post-packet analysis, especially in today's environment, 40 gig, 100 gig. If I got to pull trace files, that's, gigabytes, terabytes of traces that I have to analyze. Let the tool do the work for you. That's what we offer with Obsidian Skylight PBX. I'll turn it back to Yasmin now.
Thanks, Al. That was great. So I guess we're kind of running out of time here. It's already the 30-minute mark. So I'll just ask one of the questions that we had, which was, what Citrix ICA versions are supported by PBX?
So the latest version 7 as well version 6. Great question. Thanks for asking. Any others?
And then we have also, does PBX have the ability to provide packet capture trace files in a PCAP format?
Absolutely. So the beauty of PBX is we're analyzing the data as soon as it hits our capture interfaces, and you can deploy those anywhere, and it's cost effective because we're only charging you in the SaaS environment for what you consume from an analytics perspective, not what you're capturing, not those capture appliances in some respects. So yes, we can set up thresholds and triggers that will say, hey, if I exceed that login, in that tier, trigger a trace file to be captured. So I can have the best of both worlds. This rich analytical data from our packet analysis and deep packet inspection, as well the actual packets to hand to a vendor and say, hey, something's wrong with the NetScaler, one of the interfaces is having problems. Here's the trace file. Packets don't lie. Take a look at the trace. Any other questions? I know we're running over. I apologize.
Yeah, we're running over, but I just have one last one, and then we'll let everybody go. So the last question was, how many users can have access to the PBX web interface?
Numerous. So that's the beauty of it. As we talked about that briefly, just dashboards. So we can provide dashboards for groups within that the Citrix team, database team, Citrix team, network team, etc. To have views into this rich data. So once again, it's not a single-use tool, multi-user capable, and rich data capable for the specific user and groups that need to see that specific data. Thanks again for all the great questions. Sorry about rushing through this. It's a little tight half hour. There's a lot of material there. I didn't cover all of it by no means, and I rushed through some of it. I apologize.